talk that I wrote not on my own. It's become through 8 years of experience and a lot of help and a lot of journeys from lots of architects and a lot of admins. So there's a big shout out to a lot of people that have helped me over the years. So a little bit about myself. As Jody kindly mentioned, yes, I am 45 years young today. It feels a little bit pain. So a little bit myself. So yeah, so I am the FSL practice lead at Blue Wolf IBM. So I say my daytime job, yes, I am one of our architects. I'm just lucky enough to move across into the field service lightning world. The most important 3 people, the boss, as most people know, without Bryony, I would be lost. I'm quite proud to say, at the end of this month, we'll be 25 years married. So it's... Oh, the applause goes to Bryony, not me, trust me. And sainthood. And sainthood. So my daughter, Jasmine, which I'm proud to say is now 25, and she is a lawyer. I say she's my oldest. And then my junior, which is a pain, is Spencer, which I am proud to say is actually sat with us today in the front row. We were the first second-generation Salesforce family in Europe. Spencer is a Salesforce admin. Yes, we live and breathe Salesforce in our house. So it was a little bit about us. So what I wanted to do today, now this came from a gentleman called Lee Harding from Salesforce, great architect. And we showed me this pinwheel a few years ago, and it's something I use all the time. Everything I'm about to do, I'll just quite nicely go through a checklist of items to start to see where I'm coming through. And we're going to talk, not in detail today, there's some really great sessions here today, which will deep dive into most of these topics. What I wanted to just show you to do is just touch on it from an architectural point of view and a way of thinking of how we come through. So let's look at the method. So what are we going to do and how we go through this? So obviously, one of the things we look to do is everything we do as architects. We look at our objectives, our approach, our inputs, steps, and obviously, more importantly, our outputs. So this is, again, of starting through what do we want to achieve. So I'd say you may be an admin. How many of you are admins today? Quite a few. Developers? Architects? So a few. So again, it's more about, so it's whether you're starting a new org, a new build. That at the moment is quite a big project that as admins we are starting to do. So what we're going to look at from the objectives. The approach, how are we going to do it? And we start to look at, not only from a development point of view, from a change management point of view, and a use and training point of view, just to start to think about all the life cycles, and I say, and that we're going to do what the inputs from the user stories type thing, and just going through, and it's just to try to show you how we're going to go through here. So my favorite one, documentation. So hands up, how many people in this room have documentation that matches your org? Liars. You So that's one, I think the key message today is all mainly around documentation. Documentation is not something we do at the beginning and then file it in the cupboard to say, done. It's living, breathing use. Now we have some great tools, again, and some of our sponsors downstairs were with us today. You could just go to a basic Excel. The point for me is make sure you keep this live and well done. So our general architecture. So we're going to start off about scalability, usability, and maintenance. Now, this is mainly around keeping a track of not only what we're doing, but what Salesforce is doing. So one of the things we want to look at there from a performance point of view, have we put all our database in the right way? Are we looking from classic to lightning? Have we built some very old triggers and flows that can be redone? I mean, one of the things we look at from here from a usability and a sustainability point of view is looking back at internal technical debt. So how many people here have got old deduping applications still in their org today? That's now standard feature. We can start to use that internally. So it's not only just it's looking at the continuous integration that we do with the Salesforce. I say we're looking at the declarative for the programming. We want to see we're quite guilty. As admins, we will always go declarative first, devs will go devs first. And we do have that mindset. And it's just trying to stop and pause and think which is the better way to go and which way is then going to scale, as well as how much work are we going to create ourselves to keep this live. It might be a quick fix today, but we need to keep going on to it. The single org strategy. Now, I say as an architect, we're quite lucky to work with some large global clients that will have hundreds of instances. We've worked with one that's got down to one. I mean, we've seen one of them over 70,000 users, and they've got it into 4 orgs. It's just about where does it segregate. HR is normally a great case to separate out just because of the technology. But again, could it be an operational side, could it be the customer side? And it's just starting to think, as an architect, just breaking it down and not just a case of spin up a new one because we can. We start, there's pros and cons of both, and we can touch into them. But it's just more to give you some of that type of, your licensing types, again, as an end user, have you got the full enterprise? You'll see a lot of talks and think that's a really good, but have you got that? And it's just that consideration, again, of when you're bringing on new departments or new users, you don't always have to give them the full. I mean, quite a lot, one of my other builds, we've used platform licenses a lot because none of them were a sales, they weren't using service, it was just some custom objects. We start to look at that worked really well. So that's the type of looking at reports and analytics. Now, excuse me about the mic, this beer gets in the way. One of the things we want to look at, how many of you use Lightning reports in Salesforce? How many of you use external reports for Salesforce? And that's the type of thing you start to look at, is are the reports we're looking at always go up to our C-suite? If your financials are sitting in a different system, reporting only half the story may not be required for what your business is. So we can start to bring in external reporting tools. But it's just to understand who are the reports for and what are they going to be used for. So it's always trying to think more generally and understand the full process. So we always laugh at here. So this is the argument we have over, do we just keep spinning up orgs and orgs and orgs for every use? Or do we just throw everything into one? And again, we laugh and a joke, but you've got to understand between both of them, you have restrictions over limits. You've got data limitations. You've got users, and it's just trying to understand. But again, you want to look at so from an FSL point of view, if you put all the information in one org from the sales, and your service desk sits in a completely different org, how do they share that knowledge? Do they need to share that knowledge, or is it a separate business? And that's what we're trying to look for in general. So how many of you have multiple orgs? Single org? So I say it's starting to look at how much we put in, do we need to expand? And again, some of this is not our decision. So what we want to look at here is once we've now decided we have our orgs, we have our users, and we have all our processes, how are we going to build it? And this is what we're starting to look at. Some of our process automation, obviously they're coming into here, our visual workflows. Now, there is no right or wrong answer to any of here. What this is generally about is thinking, do I need to put structure? Do I need to go back to my documentation? How many of you use config workbooks or know what a config workbook is? Okay. So one of the things what we're looking for in the process automation, a great tool is what we call a config workbook. And it literally says, this is the field, this is the object, this is who can see it, and this is what automation it is linked to, what flows. Quite easy for us, we will change the name of a field and then realize something way down the line now doesn't work. Because when we've wrote that process automation, we've actually named the field. So it's starting to look at that. Obviously, we're looking now through the Lightning Process Builder and start to use the web APIs and the web calls. And it's just looking at what technical debt. Now, we know from this point of view, it's one of the big key points that's stopping people moving from Classic to Lightning, because they've built a lot of old flows that just can't be moved. So it's just thinking around there. Our formulas, I say, looking through what the field is, does it need to come through it? And it's just trying to understand that type of technology. And we look at files and social. again, this is more around thinking about storage and limitations. How many of you use an external tool for sharing, say, photographs or files? It's one of the things that we've got lots of really great partners in the ecosystem. We've got sharing pics downstairs, great partner. Photographs are huge storage eaters. Again, can you start to take them out of the Salesforce storage? They are still there for your users. Your users don't experience anything different, but we can start to lower the risk on hitting limitations and cost, which is, for our benefit, we want to show the best one. And again, we can start to look at, can we bring in the social networks, and can we use some of the storage from here? I mean, one of the things that we do, especially with emails, we attach every attachment or bring every email into Salesforce. Leave that clutter in Outlook. Bring in the relevant information. And it's starting to, we know as human beings, we're all bad housekeepers. So try and architect a system that helps and improves and guides people to good housekeeping. So we're bringing on to our architecture for our data. Now, the large volume datas. So I had a phone call the other day from one of my colleagues over in America, working with how can we process 1.5 million service calls a day? And you start to think, that's a lot. How are we going to structure that data? How is that going to scale? How is that going to, it's great from day one. What happens in 2-3 years' time when the users have been using it and this is building up and building it up? So we're going to start looking at, do we need archiving? How is this now going to start impacting in the query and the search level? Do we bring them back to say, right, any object or any record that's more than 3 years old, do we need to show that straight away into that query if it's not relevant? Look at archiving technology, looking at renaming it. It's just trying to improve that user experience so they're not showing. I mean, we all see opportunities close one on a related list. And we scroll and scroll and scroll, especially if you've been on Salesforce now for potentially 20 years, as it's their birthday today. Some of them orgs are quite large. And about the data movement. Now, we've looked at here from external data, data loader. Are we just bringing it in? Or can we use flat files? Are we going to start using integration tools like MuleSoft, Jitterbit, Red Hat? It's just looking at how are we going to get that data in and out? And how are we going to secure that data movement? I mean, one of the projects we saw the other day, full security, encryption, code, shield, the lot. And then I look in the top right-hand corner, export to Excel button was there. Straight away, how do we not only manage it, but how do we ensure that not that it's ever been done? As a salesperson, what's my CV? Download all accounts. So again, it's just looking at that type of story. Single sign-on. Now this, I do apologize. Single sign-on can be as complex or as simple as you need to do and bring it in. How many of you use single sign-on today? Perfect. From Active Directory or from social? AD, which is the general one. But this is where you start to now look at, from the community point of view, how do we control that? How do we maintain our joiners and leavers and people moving around the business? And the single sign-on quite as well. And there's lots of ways of doing it. One of the things what we've noticed today is now a lot of people have moved to mobile. We know Salesforce is mobile first. We need to start to look at, from that point of view, we have our phone and we have 20, 30, 40, some of them hundreds of apps. How do we control signing on to all the apps? The first thing we do, we all set don't expire password. We've now just brought that away. So we can start to look at technology outside of Salesforce. So we have MDM solutions, which is mobile device management, which would allow you to sign on to your phone, which then can pass all that data through to all your objects. We can start bringing in additional tools to AD, which can actually help with all here. It was just around business security and architecture security. but also about the user experience. How can we make the user experience nicer and easier and not painful? We were talking to, how many times you've heard this? Oh, it's quicker. Opportunities, close one in less than a minute. Because it's quicker and easier for the salespeople to go and send emails, go and see the clients, do all the deal, and then just come print Salesforce. Because we've made it so hard. And that's the type of thing of, oh, it takes too long to come in. And that's where I say we cross over to the identity management side of it. How do we know the person that is signing on is actually that person? And I say we've now got facial recognition, fingerprint. We can really utilize the technology of our phones. So it's just thinking broad outside of Salesforce and bringing it into the tool. Our sharing and visibility. Now, this is a subject I promise not to dive too deeply into. It's a very complex one, and as many of you sat this exam, there is so many variations that you can do here. The bit I wanted to show onto here is pick one. As an architect, start to simplify it. I work on large project teams. I can almost tell sometimes by looking at how it's been done, which developer or which admin's done it. You start to see telltale traits. And I say from the documentation and from a business point of view, try and simplify everything down to what fits the best common. Simple first and work your way up. Don't just think, oh, I've seen a great blog, I'm putting that in for here, and then next week I'm putting this in. Structure it, stay away from the passion. And again, obviously, we touch back into here the data sharing as well as the security. And we want to make sure that as you look at it from an architectural point of view, if you went back to the pinwheel, how does this go right the way around and tick off as many of them boxes? And it's a nicer, different way of thinking. So our technologies and our integration. Integration can be as simple. I got asked the other day to turn to an integration meeting to connect to Outlook. It's an integration. I have another client that we are working with that's going to hit just about 140 integration connections through a large global client. Again, it's we're not doing it from day one. It's a long-growing project, but you know in your business what other tools and other systems you have. Start to think about a plan that will grow, scale, and is sustainable. And there's different ways to do it, obviously. We're looking through the whole landscape. Do we need to connect Salesforce to your financial tool at any point, into your service, into any additional? What information is in the hall here? Now, we've got lots of ways of doing it. We could throw it all into a data cloud or a warehouse, or as I like to call them now, the swamp. Because without structure, a lot of businesses now are going, yes, we've got this data lake, put everything into a lake, it'll be great, we can share it. And the lake just fills and fills. And it's working with the other people in the business and the other divisions, and as a team, just think of the overall growth. It's almost like a spider's web of how it's going to start today, but where's. And we're not saying you have to build it all today, just understand that there's a potential and you haven't put yourself down a technical dead end that you can't come back from. And I say there is lots of tools out here. I say we've got MuleSoft, which is a fabulous tool built on the Salesforce platform. You then go to the other extreme of something, let's say as IBM, I will have to say it, Red Hat. Large scale, huge integration pieces can handle multiple. And again, it's what tool, but not only just Salesforce. Go and sit with your IT team. Try and understand what tools they use. Have they already got something? Is there a more global decision to start to work through here? And again, this is just around about making sure that you can track everything. Design and functionality. Now, I am not a designer by any means a shot, but I have been lucky to work over the last 12 months with a lot of really good design teams. And it started to make me think about not only just the agile point of view, but the actual usability, the UI, the UX. We all use Microsoft. We all use Apple. Now, I'll say if we had a Microsoft tool, we know as soon as we open it, there's certain buttons and there's certain creatures' comforts that we know, whether it's Excel, Power BI, there is that familiarity. And we all love that. How much of that do we bring into Salesforce? So when you start to look at two objects, is your chatter post always in the same corner, or does it move around? Do your related lists start to show some familiarity? Do they start, and rather than just building each one as it is, come back, review it all, and start to look at some of that processes. And Salesforce does this really well on its own, to say your buttons you know are in the top right-hand corner. It gives you that thing. And that's what you want to start to look for. And I say, I'm part of the design. How many of you use Lightning components? How many of them do you are reusable Lightning components? It's great to see. I mean, obviously the hands come through. So I was quite lucky. We built a component for risk analysis. And then I built a few others. And it was for a large global client that we had multiple projects. And we actually started to speed up, and it almost become a sweet shop build. Right, I've got one of them, drag it across. And we all use reports, very similar. We come through, and that's where one of the things with the design of web components is don't name objects. Allow it then to be, that component can come through. Like we say, we drag a pie chart across onto a report, and then decide which objects it's actually going to show. So we use them today, but trying to look at that more from an architectural point, that when you're building something, it can be reused. May not be tomorrow, but it will come back and start to do it. And this, again, comes back to the multiple orgs. What you build for one part of your business may be really useful for a completely different part of the business. And again, straight away, it helps us define and speed them all up. Communities, again, is a very complex one. We touched on it before. How do we ensure that our users that are using the communities are still, especially when you start bringing in the financial, if I want to see my invoices or my statements. Now, a lot of the time we would pass this over to our clients to self-manage. If you're in the B2B industry, that's quite a norm, but again, how do we protect not only their data and come all the way through? The UI and the UX capabilities of communities. Do you build one that's to your brand, or is it more for, say, subcontractors to be using? What is the purpose of the community? And so often we get so caught up into, oh, we can do everything. And there's a great fundamental that someone showed me is, just because I can doesn't mean I should. And I tried to stay quite well with that. So we touched on mobile. Excuse me a moment. Now, we are very lucky to have both Salesforce One and Field Service Lightning pre-built for us, the full benefits, all the security, all the really, I mean, from an FSL point of view, they now prime offline objects for us. We don't have to do anything. It can allow people to work now fully offline all day. So there's a lot of tools that are in there. Yes, now there is some restrictions. You can't obviously customize it the way you want. But again, it's starting to look at, before you jump over to the other side of going hybrid HTML5, what is the business requirement? Is it a nice to have? Do we need to? But then obviously the structure, if you do come out of here, you are stepping out of the comfort zone and of the security of Salesforce. You now need to think of, I have 3 updates a year. I have to keep on top of here. Both Android and Apple update normally once a year. I now have to keep the pros and cons and what it's going to cost to keep that new app alive. And like I say, we've got some brilliant partners as well downstairs that can really help with that. I say Mobile Caddies, for one I work with a lot. Great company. So this is one that we wanted to touch on about once we've decided, how do I move something so fast? I do it straight in production. Yes. And we do actually have one guilty person sat with us. It's a project we've just finished, and I'm glad to one of our clients and say, yes. Oh, we were testing this. It's like, where? That was quick. Oh yeah, I did it in production. And then obviously we come back and we think of, how did that happen? So we wanted to start off from an architectural point of view. Now we've thought about our design. We've thought about what we're going to do. This is about how are we going to get it to production. So we're all hopefully very familiar today with change sets. Use them really good. And they do work. I say, yes, we know that there is certain limitations. You've got a lot of post and pre-steps to do with here. So what I wanted to touch on just as we carry on through is what, from an architectural point of view, where can we go next? What's the next step from change sets? Let's say production is always an option, but we want to take it to the next one. So we wanted to touch on how many of you use source control and tooling like that. So hopefully this looks very familiar to most of you. And what this is around us, as you can see, we've got Maven's Mate, which is still a brilliant tool, into what we call Git, which is a nice repository of when you actually do the stuff. And this works really well when you have the multi-org structure. Stuff, obviously, change sets we know where you can't move from different environments. This tool allows you to actually bring everything across. And it comes through into tools like Jenkins and Ant, and it pushes the way through. And we start to look at branching strategy and development strategy, and reusability. And as you can see, it moves all up. Now, don't worry, you don't need all these environments. It was just an example to show you how complex and how this can scale a lot bigger. And it's just the next step for admins and devs to start moving across into here. And as always, Salesforce always come back. DX. How many of you have looked into DX model? How many are you using it? Okay, so quite a few. Now, again, we all use DX because we're on Trailhead. Trailhead, obviously, is that whole point of spinning up a new sandbox, but bringing in not only just with the code, bringing the metadata and all the files, and bring a lot of speed and efficiency. And again, what we wanted to show is there's just the next level from doing it in production. And these tools are just as quick, and then sometimes they are actually quicker because you can start going back to reusable components and reusable code and just bringing it all through. You listening, Sven? So from the deployment and the bits, and this is something I'm guilty of, and I'm sure all of you are. How easy is it to drag a field on page layout from one side to the other? It's seconds. Yeah, that's easy. I can do that for you. And then you get every single user phoning you up saying, field's gone. Field's gone. It's not there anymore. Yeah, it's here. Yeah. And that, again, this is one of the things we wanted to try and talk on, is everything has a complexity level, not only just from our side, from the user. So we look at here, so moving a field from a technical complexity is very low. But from the user's point of view, it's a bit higher. And what we wanted to look at is change management and learning, and how not only do you do here. Do you all have fixed release windows that you do stuff to production? This is the thing, exactly. How do your users know when something's going to happen? And again, if you went back to, say, the agile methodology, you could start to say, right, it's 2-week sprints, 4-week sprints. The users know, and you set fixed calendar points that you know, right, updates come in, and give yourself a cutoff. So if you're going to do a release the last Friday of the month, set yourself 7 days before a fixed cutoff date. If the requests haven't come in, and it's hard to start, very quickly your users will buy in it, and so will your management, because there becomes a structure. It starts pushing through really quickly. And I say, and we come through. And then obviously, we look at, from the other end of the scale, technically it could be really, really hard. But from a user's point of view, Do they even know that change happened? You start moving code from the back end or formulas, and let's say you've gone from triggers into process builder. A user, I still click that, and it still gives me next. I didn't really care. But it's understanding the differences between all them and starting to say, to get you set. I mean, my wife kills me the fact I call myself an architect. I mean, I come from a construction background where I used to be what she calls a real architect. Now she just calls me a pretend one. She's like, you don't build anything. You just move boxes around. But yeah, so it's, think of this and give yourself some real structure about how you're going to actually push this out. Worked fine when it was in Dev. This, yeah, we laugh and a joke and we look at here. This goes back right to two of the earlier key points. Was it documented in your config logs? Or have you been doing stuff in production? So when you make them quick changes, and then a project comes in later on, and you go back to your dev stack, and you move it through, and everything does work fine. And it literally hits when you've hit that production level. And again, we all see it, and it's the panic mode, and we come through. So when we talked about earlier the release management and notifying our users, how many of you have a strict guide and a process of notifying your users on changes coming? 1, 2. You're showing off now. So one of the things we wanted to say is learn from ourselves. How many of you have seen that? 3 times a year, Salesforce give us a nice program and a structured piece of work. Give us structure. We know what's coming. Give us our sandboxes. Give us our release notes. Allow us to prep, allow to time, and come all the way through. So start to actually follow some of the best practices Salesforce give us as admins, and pass that back to our end users. Yes, we don't need to go to this level of detail, but we're so familiar to it. We know. I mean, I'm selfish. We've all read, obviously, the release notes. Do you then pass this on to your users? Do you simplify it for your users? Or do you just let them find out for themselves and then bring in the help desk calls? Why has this suddenly changed dramatically? So yeah, we just wanted to touch on the pieces from here. So hopefully, you found some bits, I say, helpful. It is a very broad scan, and I say we didn't want to take you up for 6 days worth of life and going through it all. Any questions at all? That's what we like. It's gone.
What advice would you give to a developer or admin sort of early in their career but would like to become an architect in the future?
So the question was, obviously, what best advice would you give to an admin or a developer in the start of their career? We always look very simple of Trailhead is a great way to start to see the architectural certification path. But start looking outside of Salesforce. There is some brilliant documentation and brilliant guides around others. And architecture is architecture, the good processes. But I say, if you actually look, Lee Harding has a great blog. I say, and if you look at it, it's called the Salesforce Application Governance Method. SAGM, he calls it, and that pinwheel comes from. Is a brilliant documentation and start. But again, reach out to some of the CTAs, some of the architects this here. I mean, I know I personally am one of the co-leaders of the North England user group with Phil Walton downstairs. I sit a lot with a lot of the London user groups. We know on both of them, they do a buddy and mentor system. Find architects, reach out, and ask them. I say, try and get a mentor would be a great way of starting. Any more questions at all? Yes, sir.
Road to CTA, the prejudices, you have to be a developer to become an architect.
Do I need to be, so the question is do I need to be a developer to be an architect? Wow, that's a question. I personally say yes. I look at, as an architect, I spend most of my time not really inside of Salesforce. I'm looking at more the integration side, SOC calls, REST calls, API calls. I've also then got to work with SAP. I spent a lot of the time with iDocs and BAPIs and SAP. Nothing to do with Salesforce at all. When you start getting to like the CTA technical architect level, yeah, and brilliant people downstairs like Kia will explain this, is yes. Personally, I think, do I need to write code? Maybe not. Do I need to read and understand code? Definitely. But me personally, if you get to a level to read and understand code, you'll be able to write it. So I would say definitely. I mean, obviously, part of the architect path, I said we've seen the triangle, we can go up the left-hand side like I have as a solution architect, and then obviously come back. It's just if you want to get to that pinnacle, yes, you would need to know both. Yes.
So you've been mentioning several times talking about technical debt. How do you measure it?
So how do I measure technical debt? So we have 3 ways, personally, that I could measure technical debt. Technical debt that I know about. So for instance, I know something is coming out in summer. I know it's on the roadmap, whether it's summer or further on. But as a business, my business needs that functionality today. So I'm going to write something custom to give the business what they need. That is what I'd class as known technical debt, because I know I'm doing something not right. Other technical debt you can start to look at when you can do assume technical debt. So for instance, if you have a connection to Facebook 3 years ago, that would never been on your technical debt potential roadmap. Obviously, what's gone on with Facebook and Zuckerberg over the last few months, Facebook's users, so that could be a potential technical debt. You just don't know. And then obviously there's the complete unknown one, is where something you were all in good practice and something does come up. And then you need to review how I go back to that technical debt. Do I need to go back to that technical debt? So we may have trying to think, we have built workflow to do something. And now it can have been solved a lot cleaner and a lot slimmer with Process Builder. Yes, technically that is technical debt. Is it technical debt I need to address? Does that make sense and help answer your question?
Partially. How do you measure it?
How do I measure it? What, as in measure it in time, cost? Cost, we could measure cost with technical debt. So if you've had to purchase a product, so if we went back to technical debt 1, you built something today, know it's coming on the roadmap. So you could see how much I've now had to sign up contractually to an app to build that technical debt. So yes, you could measure it through a change log. Right. Change log could be quite good. Technical debt quite could be log. You could use red, amber, green risk matrix logs, which you could, again, measure it from impact. You could measure it from cost again. How much am I paying for an app compared to how much time I believe that's going to take me? So you could measure it 2 ways, or you need to measure it, have I got that capability to take it out? So you could measure it, and I personally use very simple documentation. Time, cost, and license model. And I don't go. I like to simplify stuff, and just a very simple sheet. I mean, if we wanted to really do, we could build an app in Salesforce and track technical debt. And I've seen people do that. Cool. Hopefully, I would say we can definitely have a chat more offline in a bit more detail. I think we've got room for one more question if there is one. Perfect. Well, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'll speak to you soon.